Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to have you all here today. My name is Joni Parsons. I'm founder of Rebel 11, and it's so lovely to have Israa Nasir here today. I want to tell you a little story about myself first, but I really feel like this book, Toxic Productivity, was written for me. And, from a very early age, even in high school, my grandma would always say, it's like you're on a roller coaster and you can't get off. And I laugh at that now, but there was a lot of truth to that. And as an entrepreneur today, I am always chasing that carrot in front of me. It's like, what's next? Where are we going? How are we going to get there? I don't pause much. I don't celebrate successes. And I certainly don't have that feeling of accomplishment because I just keep going. This book has helped me realize that I can get off that roller coaster and start living my life by reclaiming my time and emotional energy. So thank you. Thank you so much. Israa is a psychotherapist, speaker, and founder of the digital mental health brand, The Well Guide. Israa curates meaningful experiences through therapy, workshops, engaging creative content, and speaking engagements to further amplify the message of emotional wellness and personal growth. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm just thrilled. So we want to get an idea of why our audience, why you have joined us today out there in the world. And so if you would put in the chat, why are you here today? Like, what drew you to this conversation about toxic productivity? With the tagline, reclaim your time and emotional energy in a world that always demands more. So I know I'm here because even my friends go, "Oh, I'm so glad you're reading that book." So why did you join us today? And if you would put that in the chat. Everybody's being shy today, Isra.
Yeah,
Trying to recover from burnout. Thank you.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's a big one, I think.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. And then also what we would like to invite you to do, okay, here's some more. Burnt out, feel run down and rugged, not accomplishing much, never seem to get everything finished. I feel like I need to do, and I'm learning to just be. You and I were talking about that earlier. Learning
Hmm.
new ways to live. I want to have more control over my time and not feel like I'm constantly pulled in 10 directions. Does that
Yeah.
sound familiar?
It definitely sounds familiar to me, as somebody who definitely struggled with toxic productivity for a long time. And then someone said they want newer ways to live, which I really love because that's kind of the best way to approach self-care and self-growth is just like curiosity as opposed to trying to rehaul. Um, and someone just used the phrase time snob, and I think that's such like an eloquent way of actually describing what this is. I mean, I wish I knew that phrase as I was writing this because yeah, like it's about like optimizing and toxic productivity is just about making sure that everything is being done in the most optimal way. And that's just not possible a lot of the times, but we keep striving for it.
We
And
sure
not
do.
spending time, yeah, not spending time celebrating, or a lot of people who struggle with toxic productivity, and we'll get into this later, um, are they kind of feel like success is expected of them, or it's obligatory for them to do it. So how can I even celebrate something that is something I'm supposed to do, right? And so it becomes very challenging.
So we always love for our conversations to be, really something that moves you. So we would like to have you think about an intention for our next hour together and to really think about what you want to get out of this. So set your intention for this conversation and let's go ahead and get started. So, Israel, why did you write this book? You talked about all the other self-help books out there, and you saw that there was this opportunity in front of you.
This book is essentially like an amalgamation or a culmination of me trying to understand myself. In a couple of years ago, I was really struggling with feeling connected with my life. I really felt like I had done all the things. Like I felt like I had met the checklist criteria, done all the right things. And I was always promised, like many of us are, that, if you do the right things, happiness is just around the corner. Right? Like you're gonna feel good just after this next thing that you get. And, having been an overachieving student and person for most of my 20s, I really was feeling a huge gap in that. Like, I felt like I was getting the accomplishments, but I wasn't getting that promised joy. And so I started doing a lot of research on this topic just to understand myself, to rule out any mental health issues, because I'm a therapist. So that's really what I was thinking about. And this essentially what I started realizing is the research very solidly says that our emotions drive our behavior, and unresolved emotions lead to unhealthy behavior dynamics like overfunctioning, like saying yes too much, like doing too much, right? As an effort to feel good about ourselves. So the research was laying out this relationship very strongly. But in reading personal development, self-help literature, stuff that's in the bookshops, that wasn't reflected in that. That idea that unresolved emotions are the ones who are driving you wasn't there. A lot of productivity stuff, productivity books were very behavioral, very much about habit changes, behavior changes, creating a system, changing your environment, which are all helpful, which are all valid, which are all research oriented. However, if you don't resolve the unresolved emotions, you could set up all the systems you want. But when that emotion comes up, you are going to struggle. And so my hope was that through this book, because it helped me in learning my unresolved emotions, recognizing how I carry shame, how perfectionism truly shows up for me, what it looks like for me, how fear drives so much of my productivity habits. Learning that stuff helped me, and I'm hoping that through this book, people can have a better relationship with their unresolved emotions.
That's fantastic. So, and you do such a great job in the book, just talking about that. And then also on each chapter, there are questions that, go in, need to be self-reflective, like she was saying. It's like, what is leading to toxic productivity? So really quickly, just what is your definition of toxic productivity? And then we'll go into what is healthy.
Yeah. Toxic productivity is a mindset where we start becoming singularly focused on external outcomes and achievements as a way to feel good about ourselves. And so we develop this tunnel vision in this mindset that becomes completely outcome oriented, not just at work, but anywhere. Your children become a way for you to feel achievement. And so you kind of demand perfection from them. Your romantic relationship, your wellness, the way you look. And in this mindset, we become so tunnel visioned on outcome and achievement that we start deprioritizing other parts of life, like true health and wellness, true self care, relationships, rest, playfulness, joy. And because how good we feel about ourselves is now external to us, it's because of some other outside achievement. We never actually feel good about ourselves. So we're always feeling like we need to do more. And so it's kind of like this like paradox, where the unhealthy behaviors continue to feed the unhealthy behaviors. Yeah,
It's like a vicious cycle.
it is.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it really is. So, what is healthy productivity? I love this definition. I see healthy productivity as being more sustainable because it includes guardrails that help you stay connected to your values and goals over a long period of time without sacrificing your health and wellness.
Yes. So our
Guardrails.
current Yeah, our current definitions of productivity very much revolve around optimizing output, even if it means you're skipping lunch, even if it means you're not sleeping well, right? It's like, it's despite all those things, you're being productive. But true healthy productivity includes rest. So in the process is baked in taking breaks and resting and rejuvenating. In the process is baked in your values. Unhealthy toxic productivity is driven by a lot of comparison. So the outcomes that you are chasing are often based on what other people are doing or what others have told you you should do or what you think you should do because of these imaginary timelines that we live under. And true healthy productivity is value driven. So what you're pursuing is connected to you, and it is also has rest and joy and breaks baked into it, and it does not disregard your health and wellness.
Which is so important to live a nice, healthy, balanced life, right? So
And
how
I'll
do,
I just
yeah,
want
go
to say
ahead.
a quick thing. A lot of people sometimes ask me if this is an anti-productivity book because, they will say things like, why are you against productivity? And what I want to say, if this is a thought that's coming up for you, I actually want us to be productive for longer. And we can only do that as a culture, as a society, if we actually have long-term sustainable productivity. If every 5 years you're getting burnt out and you're gonna like just kind of tap out of your life, like that actually affects overall productivity.
Absolutely. And we don't like I was saying early on, we don't take that time to pause. We don't take that time to self-reflect and ask, how are things going in your life? And I have a client right now who's going through a lot of stress, and she went to the doctor to pop some pills. Like, self-reflection at that point is probably better than just, getting something to kind of mask the symptoms that we're having health-wise. So I want to talk about, how do you begin to shift your mindset from this toxic productivity to healthy productivity, and learn to identify the connection between productivity and self-worth, which, you've already mentioned that, but how do we start shifting? Like, what are some of the tools to use to get over to a more healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, so there's two sets of things that we can engage in. One is like our emotional exploration, and the other is making some behavioral changes. And depending on what is more accessible to you as a person, like if you're somebody who is in the habit of exploring your emotions, let's say you're somebody who regularly journals, maybe doing more of the self-reflection will feel more comfortable. If you're someone who has never reflected on this and you're just starting to feel a little disconnected, then perhaps doing some behavioral changes along with the reflections is more helpful. But in terms of like shifting our mindset, one of the things that I have found to be incredibly helpful is seeing if you can add small moments in your week where you are doing something that is not outcome oriented. And it doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be involved, it doesn't have to be expensive, it doesn't have to be in a club outside of your home. Anything that you can engage in that is for the presence, the process, and the joy of doing it in that moment will start to help you expand where you get that feeling of good. Because when we are unacquainted with that, which many of us are, we only get that feeling of good when we feel like we have achieved something, like a check mark. And when I say this, some of the most common questions is, how can you even do something without achievement? Everything has an achievement oriented lens, right? So doing a creative craft without actually trying to become better at that art form. So doing like a at-home pottery kit that you can get for like 20 bucks that comes with the clay and the tools and the paints, but you're not actually making something to be good at it. So you're not trying to make something beautiful. Doing a puzzle, the whole purpose of a puzzle is to break it and then put it back in. You can
Yes.
if you're more artistically inclined, you could join like an improv group, but without the desire to just crush it at improv. Really, again, for the presence, for the connection. If you are more of an introverted individual, free writing, expressive writing. Like those are ways that we can do things that are not outcome oriented. It's usually falling along the lines of craft. Or you could also do something that's like body related. So moving your body, taking a dance class for fun, doing a low impact workout, but not really measuring an outcome for it. The way I see it, it's anything that you're not going to post about on social media. Because the moment we post about a hobby on media, it becomes performance. And what we're trying to do is we're trying not to perform. So that's one way to shift out of this mindset. Another good way to shift out of this mindset is to learn how to recognize uncomfortable emotions in your body. Most of us are very unfamiliar with what resentment feels like. We are unfamiliar with like what disappointment feels like in our body. We know what anger feels like, and often that's what we experience. But doing a little bit more of like deep breathing, I know it sounds so simple, but it truly is
So
a
helpful.
gateway into learning yourself. Because what that does is if you can recognize an uncomfortable emotion, you are less likely to react. So a lot of us will overcommit, say yes to too many things because we don't know what that discomfort, that resentment of like, why are they asking me to do this? Like feels like we just feel something uncomfortable when someone asks us. So we just say yes to alleviate that tension.
Yeah, I think that's so true, and I can relate to all of that. I mean, somebody asked, "Can you give examples?" So I'm so glad you did. Are there some examples from your work with people who have shifted from this toxic productivity into a healthy mindset and really, thrived in their lives moving forward from those shifts?
I think that's a really important question to explore. The whole idea of growth is not that growth is going to be a stagnant state you stay in. And as a therapist, this is like people come in, they're like, okay, when is this feeling going to go away? And I never, ever want to feel it again. And the unfortunate truth is that feelings always circle back. Like there will be days where you might have really healed from toxic productivity, but there might be a season in your life where it just comes back. And that doesn't mean that you haven't done the work. That doesn't mean that you're not successful. And so even the definition of thriving is not this absolute state where you don't feel something uncomfortable or distressing or stressful. The point is that we are becoming better and better every season at the skill of managing our emotions in a healthy way. And so, yes, I can talk about myself. Like, I definitely had a very unhealthy relationship with productivity for most of my life. Really worked on this. It was like a 2-year journey with my own therapist to resolve some of the powerful emotions. For me, it was predominantly shame around not being productive enough because it was my identity to be good at everything that I did. Dismantling that, making my life a little bit more diverse, making it less outcome oriented and all that stuff. However, 2 months leading up to the book launch last fall, it was a sprint time. There was so much press happening. There were so many deadlines. And so I did have a season where I could sense that that feeling was coming back. But this time I was more prepared. I had more tools. If anything, I just had more awareness. I could at least take a step back and be like, whoa, like I'm in like a busy season right now. And so someone left a comment that, there's real world deadlines, there's real world pressure. You have to do work. And to that, I would say, absolutely. We cannot tap out of our circumstances. What we can do is find ways to make our circumstances within its limitations a little bit more palatable. So if you cannot take a 30-minute lunch break, if you are in a work environment where you have to eat lunch at your desk, because that still exists, can you try to see if you can go for a 10-minute walk at any point during the day? Can you do a 90-second meditation in between meetings? Right? That's something I used to do. I used to work at a very hyper speed, lean startup, early stage, just,
Right.
5 people doing the work of 20 people. And I built in like a 90-second meditation in the middle of meetings to reset and join another meeting without feeling overwhelmed. And research has shown that there is not a significant difference between a 90-second meditation and a 3-minute meditation. You're getting the same benefit. So it's just finding ways to make your life feel more manageable.
I love how you say that there's small things that you can do throughout the day. And then also it's important to remember those guardrails that,
Mm.
to protect yourself and what's important to you. And we all have those choices, but sometimes they're hard to make and
Yeah.
or hard to commit to because they're there for the asking. We have to remember that, our life is our life and that it's really important to take care of self first. And
Mm.
that's not always the easiest thing to do.
Mm.
So, in this relentless productivity, you mentioned early on that a lot of times that it comes from, our childhood experiences, our cultural myths that we've been led to believe that, doing is going to lead to success. How do we really start looking, inward to get the answer for how we begin to have more guardrails, to take more time for ourselves? Is it all about self-reflection? Like, talk to us about, some of your clients and how they looked at their experiences and made change.
I think the biggest red flag that really pushes people to change is honestly like just feeling completely burnt out. Oftentimes, people will continue operating for as long as they can. And then it's really hitting this like wall where suddenly one day you're like, wow, I really don't want to go to work. And then you call in sick, right? Even though you're not sick. Or something happens in your relationship. So there's always like this kind of like breaking point, I think, for most people to want to make a little bit of a change because making change is very hard. And I think like in terms of is it always self-reflective? It doesn't always have to be. Sometimes you can shift behaviors to really open up room for self-reflection. If I were to ask, if someone were to ask me right now and say, Israel, like, can you take out like 3 hours a week to learn a new skill? I'd be like, no, my weeks are too busy. And then in all honesty, if I go to my app screen time, you will see that I have spent at least 3 hours in a day doing some stuff on my phone, right? Whether it's reading the news unrelentlessly, like whether it's like. And so I think there is this like idea that we are more strapped for time than we actually are. Even for folks who, let's say, have multiple roles, like you have children and you care for an elderly parent. And yes, your weeks might be so jammed that you're like, there's no way I have breathing room. Can you reflect on your commitments? Right? There's so many times we have these legacy commitments in our calendar that are just there, our social calendar. We are saying yes to events that we don't really want to go to. And so if you can't self-reflect, can you do a very, very objective life audit? Do you have to be part of XYZ after work clubs that are like 4? Can you streamline it to 2? Do you have to go to the brunch? Like, do you even like this person? Right. And so it's like those type of really, you have to confront your habits if you can't self-reflect. And the benefit of doing a life audit, which I think is a very fun exercise, if you can do it with a partner, a friend, a sibling, it's something you can do together. What you essentially do is you look back at the last 4 weeks of your life and you just assess all of the things you said yes to. And then you draw like a column and then you put down whether you wanted to go and how you felt before and how you felt after. And then you'll see there are a lot of places you'd never wanted to be at and you felt worse after leaving, right? And that happened to me too. And so it was just a matter of like reflecting on what am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? And really learning to prioritize that because some things you cannot get out of, even when it feels bad. But can you limit that? Right. And so what that does is it helps you create more space in your calendar for rest, for joy, or for self-reflection, if that's what you want to do.
Well, I want to share. I've taken on 2025 with 3 words: intentional, positivity, and say no unless it's a hell yes.
Mm.
and for the reasons that are, in your book and what you just noted. And I have realized my habits in January have, the time sucks are social media. Um, I did dry January and I realized how much time I had back by not drinking, not thinking about how much I drank, how like I read more. I just had an amazing experience and looking at myself, as Joni without the alcohol, it's like, wow, I had so much more time. So you're so right about doing that life audit. And that was a really nice introduction to the new year was kind of a life audit without alcohol and these very intentional things that I'm trying to approach in the new year, not trying, I'm doing in the new year. So it's such an invitation to look at where we are and how we spend our time.
Yeah.
Um,
And if I can add one quick thing there, I think, doing an audit like that, which you did, it wasn't like necessarily like a spreadsheet that you made, but it's just something that you shifted this one anchor behavior that had so many offshoots where it was taking time, energy, money, resource that you weren't even aware of, right? So it's like that, like what are the anchor behaviors? Like one thing for me that I really had to shift that helped me change the outlook of like how I was organizing my time to get more done was I never really valued the transition stage. And so if I finished a call at 5:30, like if my call was ending at 5:30, I would make a dinner plan for 6 p.m. Right? Like I never gave myself buffer time. And meetings, like I would stack them back to back instead of taking like a 4 minute break in the scheduling of calls. And so trying to give yourself some transition time is also really helpful. Because that can give you time to kind of transition and again opens up your calendar, prevents you from feeling that burnout.
I love that so much. Habits are so interesting to take a look at because so much of life are about habits. So can
Mhm.
we talk more about how does self-care and self-acceptance fit into the equation and how are they different?
Self-care is what you do to nourish yourself, and self-worth is how valued you feel in your life because of yourself. Like just not an external achievement, not the role you play in someone's life. You're just like your basic human value. Right. And so, I mean, there are different concepts, but they kind of feed into each other. Right. So self-care, I think, has become a very confusing concept now. I think it's like a $13 trillion industry projected by 2027, and everything is self-care. And so when anything becomes so ubiquitous, it just loses meaning. And so self-care genuinely is something that nourishes you and recharges you, and that's all. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to have a cost. It doesn't need to be a beauty treatment. It can sometimes be as simple, like my self-care is sitting in the morning and having my coffee and breakfast unstimulated. No sound, like no TV, no email, no internet, like no Instagram. That is what just helps me feel grounded for the day, right? It doesn't cost me a single thing except a 15-minute buffer in the morning, right? And so self-care is something that we have to really be intentional about. We can't just do what other people are doing. The more you value self-care, the better you'll feel about yourself. So that's like the relationship between the two. But our self-worth is not contingent on self-care. I really want to be clear about that. Our self-worth comes from all of the intangible good that we bring to the world. And our self-care is just a series of habits we have to do to maintain our wellness. A really foundational piece of self-care is going to the doctor regularly. And studies have shown that most women are able to make doctor's appointments for the people they care for, whether it's their children, their partners, or parents, but they won't go to the doctors themselves. And so just remembering that self-care before it's anything glamorous or beautiful is very foundational. Going to the doctor, moving your body once a day, sleeping well, hydrating yourself, like that's the foundation of self-care before anything else.
And so, talking about your morning and giving yourself that gift of time, do you have a morning ritual that you do every day that, besides that, or in addition to that, that helps you ground for the rest of the day?
No, my morning routine is super simple, very streamlined. I don't like to put any more pressure on myself. I've tried a lot of stuff, I will tell you that. And it's worked in different seasons. And I think that's another thing is like we seasonally change. I don't mean like the calendar season, just the time in our life. When I was writing the book, doing morning pages was very helpful for me. And because it was just getting the, creativity flowing, my thoughts, like things I was thinking about the night before. So doing morning pages, I did morning pages for maybe like 7 months, which is like a
Wow.
specific way of journaling in the morning. But I don't do that right now. And I haven't done it in a year, and that's totally fine because it doesn't serve that purpose anymore. So yeah, I don't do anything more than just my coffee and my breakfast. I'm
Well,
a big
that's
skincare person, so I do that in the morning, but that's just like a part of my
well,
brushing.
your skin looks amazing.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah.
my
Sunscreen.
part of my morning routine is walking, and it's more of a walking meditation, and it's just such a beautiful way to start the day. So I want to talk a little bit about, so much of our work habits and our, continuing to, get to the next carrot, or, that next, career move can be, so I think of it as being my sense of purpose a lot of times. But really, where does self-purpose or a sense of purpose come in if it's not related to accomplishment?
I think that you can have an end goal for purpose. The way an accomplishment kind of muddies it a little bit is by creating it as a measurement of worth and against a yardstick of other people's success. So that's really where it get like the thing can be the same. Like your purpose, for example, could be, let's say, to start a nonprofit, right? Like your purpose is to give back to community. It becomes unhealthy when you start doing the comparison game of, oh, that person is starting a nonprofit. They've already done this. They're getting this press. Like they have, right? That's what creates the negativity, right? I mean, you got to have benchmarks, but you have to continue to be driven by your values. And so purpose is very much connected to the value that you care about. And how can we figure out our value in order to figure out purpose? It's a kind of a fun exercise. If you think about the last four people you dated, um, think about the things you didn't like about them. You're likely going to see a theme that you don't like in certain people. And you can kind of like extrapolate a value from that. If consistently you don't like people who speak rudely to serving staff, let's say, right? That was like a thing that came up for you when you were dating or with your friends. That indicates that a value you have is kindness. And so that gives you one, like value point. And so kind of by exploring what you like in other people, what you don't like in other people, what are the commonalities in the people you like being around, all of that will give you insight into what you value. And then you can use that value system to find work or non-work activities that help you get closer to living that value, which is purpose.
I love that so much. And that really does take some self-reflection. I mean, I've always been very value oriented in my, work, and trying to make sure that my work and my personal life align so that I'm living in integrity as much as I can, because that's the commitment to myself. And but there's so much to be said for when we just drive and drive and drive, that we don't take time to figure out who we really are, who we are as our true self. So how can we begin to identify that inner critic and instead focus on the inner coach? We're
Yeah.
also we're all so hard on ourselves, and just like that conversation what you were just talking about, that if I make the wrong decision, I'll just beat myself up, and or if I think I made the wrong decision. But like, how do I start coaching myself into having a more restful, beautiful life?
The inner critic is it's like an inner voice we develop over time. And what happens is we stop realizing that it's actually not our voice. And that's why breaking from it is so challenging, because we believe that this is just who we are. This is how I talk to myself. These are just my thoughts, right? But our inner critic is a series of different people and voices and expectations that kind of culminate in our brains. So identifying the inner critic is something I think that we know when we're being mean to ourselves. What is the step that we have to take is we have to realize that that is not necessary to get the outcome that you want. And so that's where the inner coach comes into play. And there are a couple of ways you can go around about doing this. One is you could actually, when you make a mistake, be very intentional about writing out all of your thoughts, right? The critical stuff, writing it out, and then writing a version that you would say to somebody else, or writing a version in the way you would speak to a child. And what that feels so foreign, but the first couple of times you do it, you might feel a little embarrassed that you speak to yourself in a certain way, or, that kind of stuff. But over time, what you're training your brain to do is to think of the stuff the coach would say versus the critic immediately. This is like a neural retraining. The reason the inner critic comes up so fast, so quickly, and so silently, like it's invisible, is because the neural pathways are very strong, because we keep thinking about it. And the more you think about something, the neural pathway in your brain literally becomes stronger and stronger. And what happens is other ways of thinking become inaccessible. So that's why when we are kind to ourselves, it feels weird, because you're not accustomed to activating the compassion part of your brain for yourself, right? You're accustomed to activating the fear part of your brain, which becomes critical and mean. So I think that this is like this like neural retraining that we can do by actually writing things out. Another thing we can do, I like doing this with my clients, is it's like a creative exercise where you create a composite character who is your coach. So who is the person you want to be around? What are they like? And you kind of create this character. And when the inner critic thoughts come up, you want to ask yourself, like, well, how would my inner coach respond to this? Again, you're putting this outside of your self, like consciousness. You're embodying it in this like third person, but over time it becomes your voice, like you become your coach. You kind of start
Like
like
that.
doing that. Yeah.
That's such a great tool to have in our toolbox. Are there any other tools that you'd like to give us? And then we're going to do a little exercise.
Yeah, so I talked about the life audit, which is one of my favorite ones, the undercommitting one I talked about, which I love. I started doing that and it really changed my life. I think that, one thing that we don't think about a lot, is spending time with ourselves. So a couple of people talked about being over busy in the chat and like doing a lot and keeping themselves really busy. In all of that, what we don't do is spend time with ourselves. So if you can build in your monthly calendar, it doesn't have to be weekly, like a solo date, I think that that has so much power in helping you shift your mind when it comes to who deserves your time. So like a solo date is really, really amazing. If you can engage in like a hobby, I think that's also really powerful. There are these antidotes to toxic productivity. And a solo date is not doing an errand by yourself. A solo date
That
is like
doesn't work.
yeah, that doesn't count. Like, it has to be like actually taking yourself out, whether it's for a lunch, whether it's for dinner, whether it's taking yourself to a show. I know this is like really overwhelming for people who don't like spending time alone. So you can start small by just going and having like a solo picnic in the park, sitting on a bench. But it's really like you're putting effort into it. Like you have to like really treat it like a meeting with yourself. I think that can really start opening up your mind to newer ways of living.
Thank you so much for those tools. I always like to have more tools in my toolbox and to help me, think when I'm like feeling stuck, like what can I do right now to get either unstuck or to live my life in a new way. So thank you so much. So we wanted to do a little exercise, and I would love for you to talk about keep, start, stop.
Yeah. So keep start stop is like a management consultant exercise that they do in teams. And I think it's like a very helpful thing to do with yourself when you are starting a new intention. Usually people are doing that at the beginning of the year. So this is a great time for it. And what you want to do is you want to reflect on your habits from before, and you want to think of one habit that you know gave you a good result at the end of the year last year. Whether it's like spending more time with your friends, eating healthy, like it could be anything, right? But that you want to think of a habit that you want to keep. And you want to commit to that for like the next 30 days or the next 60 days or whatever, right? And then you want to think of a habit that you want to stop. So here you want to be very, very, very like detailed and intentional. So saying something like, well, I want to stop eating poorly is like that is not going to help you because it doesn't even mean anything, right? So you can say, I want to stop a very specific thing. Like I want to stop drinking Monday through Thursday, right? Socially. So you have to be very particular and clear. And then you want to think of one that is, I want to start. And that's like a new habit that you're building in. Here, you want to be very small. So I'm going to work out for 60 minutes, 4 days a week. I'm going to start that. That's very unreasonable because it's asking for too much shift of time. You can get there, right? But when you're starting something new, you want to start with like the most minimal friction as possible to your current state. So I'm going to start a 20-minute workout once a week. You do that for 30 days. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to bump it up I'm going to do it for an hour, right? And then you do that for 30 days. Now I'm going to do two 60-minute workouts a week. And then you do that for 30 days. Honestly, within 6 months, you will be working out 4 times a week for 60 minutes. But it's very hard to do that right on the outset. So when you think of your start, think of something very small that you can build on.
Love that. And then how about stopping?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So I thought I mentioned that. So there's like keep, stop, and start. So stopping is again something that you can be very measured in, right? So you want to make sure that what you stop is something that you can track, that you can measure, that is something that is again not going to disrupt your whole life. Because again, that's very challenging. So I think the example I gave was I'm going to stop eating poorly. Like that's not a
Right.
reasonable
Yeah,
goal. It's
right.
like I'm going to stop drinking Monday to Thursday. Like you just kind of like making sure that it's like very, very contained. I think that we make goals and we don't realize that there's a difference between a goal and an aspiration. An aspiration is the umbrella that we are living under. It is the ideal state. It's like the big thing. The goal has to be under that umbrella that is smaller, that is something you can measure, that's something you can be flexible in. Right. And so like that's like the difference between these two. And so we take aspirations and we put them into goals, but the goals are like the smaller, uncute, like habits that you have to measure and change and be flexible on.
I love that. Thank you so much. I think that's really good. So someone said, keep lifting weights 2 times per week. Great job, Christina. And stop being stuck in overthinking. Natasha, thank you. So what advice would you give Natasha? Stop being stuck in overthinking. That's a
Hmm.
big one.
Yeah. So it's like interesting, right? Like it's definitely a big question. However, can you break it down? Can you actually start at a point of start identifying triggers of overthinking? Because in order to stop something, you need to know when it's happening. So like can break down the overthinking into like when does it happen? Who does it happen around? What happens in my body? Right? So see if you can like break it down into 4 different small goals that you connect yourself to, that you commit to over 4 months. Because to think that we're going to stop overthinking in a 30-day period even with a therapist, is not a reasonable goal, because overthinking serves a very powerful purpose, right? It is trying to protect us. It is a ingrained habit that we learn over 20 years, 10 years of our life. So it's not something that just happens. It's something we learn over time. So unlearning it will take time. And so breaking it down to, can I start identifying our triggers? Exactly. Do I identify triggers? Identifying triggers requires you to just keep a note open in your phone. And every time you notice that you're overthinking, you're like, okay, what just happened 5 minutes before? Right? Immediately, like, what just happened 5 minutes before? Who said what? When did I start overthinking? So just like 3 questions, track it for 4 weeks, you'll see a pattern. It might be right before presentations at work. It might be leaving friends and then kind of getting in your head about, oh, I shouldn't have said this, or I shouldn't have said that. It could be a physical trigger. It could be looking at something, right? It could be a memory, a scent. It can be so many things that trigger it. But unless we don't know it, we're not going to be able to work with it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I'm sure Natasha feels better already. So, so I just want to thank you so much for giving us so many things to think about today. And I'd love for you to tell us about the Well Guide.
Yeah. So the Well Guide is a digital repository of education, resource, and information around general mental wellness, well-being, and emotional growth. So I talk a lot about regulating emotions, understanding them, navigating situations in life, like what Christina is talking about, like these like conflict moments of micro conflicts in relationships. So it definitely is a lot of information that I share daily. And it's obviously it's on Instagram, so it's like short form. The long form version is on my Substack. I kind of go deeper into it, and once a month send out a newsletter that has worksheets, resources, recommendations. Like it's like a little packet that goes out to the Substack community. And one of my values is access to education. I feel very driven by that. And so everything I do in my life has that thread, whether it's working at the startup that I'm at, my Well Guide, my book, my Substack, my speaking, my podcast, like it's all in service of increasing access to education for people around mental well-being, because I've been a therapist for 10 years and I know now, like, if people have access to educational resources around their own well-being, it becomes preventative in their mental health journey. And right now we're all reactive. We're like, oh, damn, I already have anxiety. I have to go to a therapist, or I'm struggling, or I have burnout. I want people to be preventative, to be proactive, to learn the signs before things happen. And so my value is access to education, because I believe people should have it. And so my work is really centered on that.
Thank you so much. And I encourage all of you to go to Isra's website and get more information. And thank you for your commitment to educating people about wellness and health. And just, we need that. We live in a society that's pulling us in so many different directions. And your book and your resources have really helped. So again, toxic productivity, reclaim your time and emotional energy in a world that always demands more. I can't recommend this book enough. Like I said, I feel like it was written for me, and I know a lot of you that have joined us today will benefit greatly from this book and all of her resources. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a beautiful day and much success with your book.
Thank you so much. Thanks
Yes,
everyone for joining.
yeah, and for all of you, with Revel 11, we have a lot of really interesting things coming up. Virtual events, we have some in-person Seattle events as well, and some global retreats this summer, and some more in the late fall. So thank you so much. Have a great day today, everyone. Happy February. Have a
Bye,
great day.
everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you.